Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, chapter 29c. This is the final part of chapter 29. Our father Abraham, his 8th trial, and this one is called Rite of Passage. Hallelu et Adonai kol goyim, shabechu kol haomim, ki gavar alenu chasdo ve'emet Adonai leolam, hallelujah. Let's get right into it, okay? We continue right where we left off last week. There are 3 kinds of affliction, inuim, that means torture in Hebrew. The affliction of the fast, the affliction of imprisonment, and the affliction of the way, meaning the road, haderich. 1, from where we have the affliction of the fast, as it says in Psalms 35:13, but as for me, when they were ill, my attire was sackcloth. I afflicted myself with fasting, and may my prayer return upon my bosom. V'ani b'chalotam levushi sak aniti la'anot. That's the torture, right? To afflict. Aniti batzom, through fasting, nafshi, not my soul, but my nefesh, utfilati al cheki tashuv. 2, from where do we have the affliction of imprisonment? As said in Psalms 105:18, Inu ba'kevel raglo, barzel ba nafsho. They afflicted his foot with fetters, his soul was placed in irons. His nefesh was... This is specifically referring to Joseph. We've actually gone through this Psalm 105 back in the Parsha teaching days. 3, from where do we have the affliction of the way, or the affliction of the road? As said in Psalms 102:24, Ina baderech kochi kitzar yamai. He has afflicted my strength on the way. He has shortened my days. Each of these situations is unique, and they all have their own restrictions. When we are fasting, naturally we become physically weak, while we become mentally and emotionally strong. You have to take something away in order to heighten our senses, right? There's a reason God told us regarding Yom Kippur in Leviticus 23:32. It is a complete day of rest for you, and you shall afflict yourselves. Ve'initem et nafshotechem. You shall afflict your nefesh, right? Shabbat Shabbaton hu lachem. Why is it called a Shabbat? Anytime it's a Chag, like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the first night of Sukkot, Simchas Torah, what else? Pesach, Shavuot, all these things are called a Shabbaton. It's not Shabbat, but the same laws, almost 99.9%, apply as to how you do things. Only then you are allowed to transfer fire, but not light or pull out or put out the fire. Okay, so we are made up of 3 spiritual elements: the nefesh, which resides in our blood, right? Because you're going to see here nafshotechem a lot. So the nefesh resides in our blood, as we can see in Leviticus 17:11. Ki nefesh habasar badamhu, for the nefesh of the flesh is in the blood. I know in the translations, whether it's nefesh or neshama, it says soul. But again, neshama is soul. That way people just get confused. So you have to read the Hebrew and see what the difference is over there. The next being, what comes after the nefesh? That is the ruach. Ruach literally means wind, but this refers to the spirit, which is the connection, the go-between. If the nefesh is here and the neshama is up there, again by remote control, what goes in between, the beinoni, the beinayim, that is the ruach. Ruach can be a positive and a negative thing. And following would be a neshama, that's the soul. So we don't need to get into the chaya and yechidah right now, those 5 elements, because it's not relevant to our discussion. All these 3 are tied to the guf, the physical body. It's called a guf. That's what a body means. While the nefesh is always in the body, like we said, it's in the blood. The ruach comes and goes. We can see this throughout the Tanakh, that this ruach and that ruach came upon a person and so on, right? But also they say ruach tova, ruach ra'ah. What kind of spirit is coming upon a person? A lying spirit, like we could see in the book of Kings, or ruach tova, and so on. Lastly, we have the neshama, which resides in the spiritual realm, and yet through the wave of ruach, long distance, if you will, is also part of our being. Okay, so let's say, when we go to sleep at night, think of like Think of like, I don't know, like a spiritual fishing rod, if you will. The neshama comes from down there. Its place is really there because it's all spiritual, right? And yet it resides in our body. But when we go to sleep, and it's our consciousness, when we go to sleep, our neshama is not in our body. That's why we say the special shema, the Shema Shalamita, before we go to sleep for a special protection, because you go to sleep, now we are defenseless, okay? They can mess with your body, with your nefesh, with your ruach, and maybe even so with your neshama. So that's why we say the Shema specifically before we go to sleep. Who is this? These are the angels of destruction. So lastly, like we said, the neshama, which resides in the spiritual realm, and yet through a wave of ruach, long distance, it is also part of our being. So when we fast, right, during these fast days where it says you will afflict your nefesh, naturally our body feels it the most. But when we don't feed the physical, then by default, the spiritual is what gets the most of it. Remove the food, elevate our consciousness towards the ruach and the neshama. But remove the food, there's just so much that we can physically do here as we are exhausted after a certain period of time. And if we go long enough, we die, right? So it's just for a very, very specific time. We can see, at the end, it's usually at the end of Yom Kippur, towards the end, like the last few hours, especially the last hour, all of a sudden you get this second wind and you feel like, yeah, I could totally fast another day. It's not a problem. And you probably can. In fact, you can fast 3 full days without food or water. If you decide to, I'm not telling you to do this. Nowhere in the Torah does it say that you should do this. But if you do decide to do this, make sure you are in a protected and very well supervised environment, okay? Without going anywhere. Again, there's no reason for you to do this. Okay. The second. What is the second thing? The second affliction, that is the affliction of prison, which is what? That's confinement. You're grounded. You're not going anywhere. And if we have nowhere to go, nor do we have any control over when we eat or sleep, walk, or anything else for that matter, then what do we have left? Think of Joseph, right? We just discussed Joseph in the Parsha. Think of Joseph, a few weeks ago. He was in prison for 12 years, 13 in total, 1 in the house of Potiphar, and then 10 plus 2 in the dungeon of Pharaoh. So why was he there? Because God was refining him in order to make him king of the world and save his brothers and humanity. Also, on a side note, I didn't write this here, but we've been discussing the Parsha in our group so much that the 13 years that Joseph was in prison were the 13 attributes of mercy that he had to receive to himself in order to be able to elevate from the status that he was previously. Again, these are our group studies, but he had to do tshuva himself because essentially it was based on his actions that got the ball rolling. And then his brothers came in and then he ended up where he was and then he fell and so on and so forth. Interesting stuff. In any case, there's an affliction of prison, very much so, for the elevation. Okay, so like we said, God was refining him by removing our own needs and wants from the equation. The only time we have to ourselves will be a time of reflection and introspection, right? Why do I love Shabbat so much? Okay, in addition to all the obvious is, I can't go on my cell phone. I can't watch TV. I can't use tech, right? I can't, and there's so much going on. There's so much information, right? You find yourself wherever you're going, you're sitting down in a waiting room or whatever, you're on your phone. Me too, everybody. This is what everybody's doing nowadays. Everybody's looking face down. And sometimes I catch myself, I'm like, okay, I got to stop this. I got to put this down and start people watching. It's actually more enjoyable. So this is, if you remove all these things, what are you going to do? You're going to start to read. You're going to start to pray, right? So the thing is to not only wait for Shabbat to do it, obviously, is to set apart the time. And that's where the prayer times come in. That's where waking up, while it's still dark outside, so you could get in a few words before the sun comes up, before you go davening, and so on. Okay, so this is reflection and especially introspection. And we've discussed the term hitbodedut many times, right? Hitbodedut comes from the word badad, boded, alone, being alone. This is how Hasidim get with God, through solitary confinement or walking out in nature. In other words, removing themselves from all distractions, from people, from things, from everything. This is how the prophets from Elijah's school of prophets would prophesy. He taught people how to be a prophet. You want to know how to be a prophet? Here's how you be a prophet, okay? Good luck, everybody. This is how they did it, by removing themselves from the public, be it indoors or outdoors, and most of the times it was outdoors, in order to shut out the noise of the world, and through silence and solitude would they be able to start hearing that still small voice that they all desperately, and we all desperately yearn to hear. They would go out into nature. Sometimes they would even bring musicians along with them because they had to get in a euphoric state. You cannot prophesy if you are anything but in a euphoric state, meaning naturally elevated and happy, completely in love with God. All of a sudden, that's when you start getting it. That's how Jonah received prophecy. He was the master of ceremonies at Simchat Beit HaShoava. Simchat, the happiness of the drawing of the water by the Shiloach pool, which they're now starting, thank God, to excavate over here in the bottom of the city of David. Chadesh Yemenu Kekedem. This is happening before our eyes, people. This Shavte Mayim Besason Mimanei HaYeshua. You shall draw the waters of Mayim Besason, waters in abundance from the wells of salvation. And then they would take that water. They would walk up to Temple Mount and the water libations. So he was encouraging everybody to dance, and he was getting everybody to dance, to do such simcha, because of the simcha that he achieved on his own and bestowed upon others. That's where he started to prophesy, right then and there. That's the first time that God hit him. Whoa, what's going on over here? Okay, anyway, so that's the second one. That's confinement, prison. What about the way? What is the affliction of the road? Again, it's shel haderech, the road, the way, or better yet, what purpose does it serve? This essentially is all-encompassing, because on the road, although you are free and you can eat and do as you will, you still don't have a moment of peace. Or like the man said, don't let yourself get attached to anything you're not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. Call it. It's easy. Anyway, that's not a good impression, but you get, I don't know. Okay. This means there is no peace. This means you sleep with one eye open. You are constantly tired and weary, and you have no idea what's coming or where it's going to come from, if at all it will come. Okay. And what did indeed come specifically on the way? Baderech. Israel's worst nightmare. Pay attention. Our mortal enemy, Amalek, Deuteronomy 25. Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek, where? Baderech, betzetchem miMitzrayim. You shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way, where you are at your weakest, when you went out of Egypt. Asher karcha baderech, next verse. When it happened to you when you were on the way and cut off all the stragglers at your rear, when you were faint, when you were weary. You see this? This is when we are on the way, we are now susceptible to Amalek. And Amalek comes at us at our weakest points when we are weakest. It's not like, yeah, I'm ready for you. It's not going to come head on. He's going to come in the little cracks and holes that you leave open for him. The worst things can happen to us on the way, which is why God told us to build the Mishkan. This is exactly how Israel lived for 40 years in the wilderness, right? They were not inside. Matovu alecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents? Tents are something very temporary. Mishkenotecha Israel, your dwelling places, your Mishkan, sanctuary. Mishkan, that's a building, right? That's the temple, O Israel. All right. So this is exactly how Israel lived for 40 years in the wilderness, meaning they were constantly on the way. Even when they weren't on the way, they were still on the way. They're in the wilderness. And we've learned plenty of times that this specific wilderness would kill a man within an hour. It was covered, the sands, everything was covered with snakes and scorpions and boiling hot sun and freezing cold nights. It was a death trap. So the fact that they were there for more than 1 hour, millions of people, and thrived and lived there for 40 years, That's only God, period. And we've learned about all the miracles that were done for them over there, not a speck of dust in the desert, in the camp of Israel, and so on. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, built in the wilderness according to the specific instructions from God, was designed to be able to be folded and erected within a moment's notice. Okay, we're going. Let's fold it up. Let's pack it up. Let's go. Here we go. We're stopping right here. Bring it up. Something beautiful occurred to me as I was writing this. Obviously, God told them to build a folding Mishkan so it can travel with them wherever they go, right? But if we think that that's obvious, then we are taking God's goodness, love, and humility for granted. God chose to have his dwellings in the lower worlds. We know this. This is what this is what God wanted. Okay, that's why I said, build a mishkan for me. This is because this is what I want to. Right? They will build me a temple, and I will dwell inside them, amongst them, and inside them. Amongst them because it's a physical place, and inside them because that's where we have to hold God. Okay, so now listen to this. So God chose to have his dwellings in the lower worlds within wood and fabric, flimsy wood and fabric, right? Within a folding mishkan that is not fit for the master of the universe. Yet it was God himself who instructed us to do exactly that. Yes, God said, I'm going to dwell in a tent. Why? Because God wanted to travel with us. I mean, we can understand this, but look at this. God wanted to travel with us and have his presence, his holy Shekhinah among us, right there in our midst as we suffer on the road for 40 years until the time the Temple of Solomon was built. He could have said, build whatever over here, take it afterwards over there. They could do whatever. They could have built anything. No, you guys are packing up your tents and you're moving. You pack up my Mishkan and move it with you. That's our God. Amazing. Anyway, and this is his anointed. Did King David not say in Psalms 132, 3-5, that I shall not come into the tent of my house, and I shall not go up into the bed that was spread for me? I shall not give sleep to my eyes, nor slumber to my pupils, until I find a place for the Lord dwellings for the mighty one of Jacob. Where is this coming from? This is coming from 2 Samuel chapter 7. And it came to pass, listen to this, and it came to pass when the king dwelt in his house, this is David, and the Lord had given him rest, finally, round about from all his enemies. God is the one who gives rest now, okay? And it is God who gave him this understanding for what is to come. Every thought that comes up, it all comes from God. Even if it's a bad thought, who do you think God sends to put those in you? You now have to say, okay, is it good or is it not good? What's good, what's not good? I don't know. But if you read the Torah, then you'll know. And, common sense, obviously. 2, that the king said unto Nathan the prophet, see now, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwells within the curtains. It was right outside in the Chatzer. If you go to the city of David, we'll show you exactly where it used to stand, and just in a tent. How could this possibly be? So one night, David goes to sleep. Finally, when he did everything he had to do, when he defeated all his enemies, and finally he was resting, he couldn't really rest. And God placed that upon him because David was the guy. Nathan then tells David, hey man, you're good, and God knows this. So whatever you do, for his name's sake, have at it. It's all good. Then look what the following says. And it came to pass on the same night that the word of God was to Nathan the prophet. Go and say to my servant, and by the way, we see how the Psalms correlate with the life of David. You could pick them out from the stories of his life. Saying, go and say to my servant, to David, the servant of the Lord, so says the Lord, shall you build me a house for my dwelling? ? For I have not dwelt in a house from the day that I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt to this day, but I've walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. God did this by choice. And all up until this time, now is when God says, you know what? Finally, my boy just defeated all the enemies. I gave him some rest. Now, because first You got to clear the area before you build anything over there, right? Otherwise, it's going to constantly come under attack. In all the places wherein I have walked, says God, I have walked with all the children of Israel. Again, God says this, Bechol asher hitalachti. God is now saying that he has walked with all the children of Israel. Did I speak a word with any of the rulers of Israel who I commanded to shepherd my people? Israel saying, why do you not build for me a house of cedar? Because God's saying, did I come to Moses and saying, did he come to Joshua when he entered the land? Did he come to all the judges? Did he even come to Samuel? Right? Samuel was like the last of the judges and the first great prophet of Israel. Anointer of kings. God said, did I come to anybody saying, where's my house? No, I did not. Right? Where have we seen this language before? Because now it's coming into play. Where did we see this? Okay. I have walked with. Exodus 3, and Moses said to God, behold, I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to... Oh, sorry. I got to read the Hebrew for you to understand. Listen to the Hebrew. Bechol asher hitalachti, that I walked bechol bnei Israel, hadavar dibarti, did I speak the thing, et achad shiftei Israel, asher tziviti lirot et ami, et Israel lemor, lama lo benitem li beit arazim? Okay, now... And Moses said to God, behold, I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Right? We know the answer. What does God say? Vayomer Elohim el Moshe, eheye asher eheye. God said to Moses, eheye asher eheye, I will be what I will be. And he said, so shall you say to the children of Israel, eheye has sent me to you. Right? I will be what I will be to you, my children, when, where, and how I need to be for your sakes. I will walk with you in the wilderness, and just as you dwell in tents, so shall I. I will settle with you in the land that I had promised you, and when you have your house in Jerusalem, so shall I. I will go into exile with you, as it had been foretold to Abraham. And when you will not know peace, nor have a place to call your home, then neither shall I. And when you return to the land that was promised, and resettle and cleanse the land as your forefathers did, when you make yourselves homes, and reestablish and rebuild all that had been lost, when all return, then so shall I. I will be what I will be. Eheye asher eheye. That is our God. Okay, moving along. The road is a very treacherous place. And that is where we are right now. Currently, yes, we are sitting in our homes made of brick and wood and whatever else they're made of. But we're still on the road. We are on the road until the temple is here and Mashiach is here. Until these things happen, we are still on the road. That is where we are all right now, whether we are in Israel or outside of Israel. Until the time comes when the Lord returns to Zion, but we keep walking our walk every day. And although we don't have a temple or a Mishkan, that's okay. God considered all of this as well, which is why he told us in Exodus 25:8, and they shall make for me a sanctuary, a Mishkan, a Mikdash, and I will dwell in their midst. V'asuli Mikdash v'shachanti betocham, among them and inside them. Now, look at what our text says. And it was due to the affliction of the way that Israel had not circumcised. Don't forget, we're talking about Abraham circumcision here, right? Here's the need to build up. And it was due to the affliction of the way, of the road, right? Sheladerech, that Israel had not circumcised, as said in Joshua 5:7. לא מלו אותם בדרך, ואת בניהם הקים תחתם אותם מל יהושע, כי ערלים היו, כי לא מלו אותם בדרך. And their children, who he raised up in their stead, them Joshua circumcised, meaning the generation of the wilderness, for they had not circumcised them on the way for 40 years. Rabbi Ishmael said, yeah, that's right. You're like, how is that possible? Rabbi Ishmael says, did an uncircumcised Israel hear the voice of the Holy One, blessed be he, upon Mount Sinai? and he gave them the Torah? Chas v'shalom. No way, Jose. Surely they were circumcised. We knew this because they had to do it right before they left on Passover Eve. So we know this, right? There's the blood of the lamb, the sacrifice, and then you also have, not the sacrifice, the kolban that they're supposed to eat, defiance in the face of the Egyptians, and the blood of the covenant. So you have those two bloods mixed on the doorpost in a hay sign, not a chet, hay, like that. And so we know that they were circumcised over there. Okay, so what's the deal over here? But rather, it says, they did not do peri'ah, the peeling back and the cutting of the skin and exposing the atara, the crown, okay, on the top of your brit, if you will. We're just going to call it peri'ah to make it easier, okay? It's basically, I have cut around, fold it up, cut it off, remove it, okay? That whole thing is called peri'ah. We're just going to call it peri'ah. And whoever is circumcised but does not do peri'ah, it's as if he did not circumcise. So now we have to ask the question, if their circumcision was not complete, because this is what Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer is saying, is he contradicting himself from one sentence to the next? No, of course not. Listen. If their circumcision was not complete, and we just read that if it's not complete, it's as if they were not circumcised, then how could they have possibly heard God's voice on Mount Sinai? Impossible, right? The answer is in the subject matter, and that is the affliction of the way. There are things that God takes into account. From the time Israel left Egypt, for the first 3 days, they were walking nonstop. And for the first 3 months, until they received the Torah on Mount Sinai, they had already stopped in 10 different places. They were constantly on the move. This affliction is taken into account, but that is not enough for us to buy. It's like, okay, wonderful, but still, I mean, there's still a certain amount of impurities that need to be tossed out before you can receive the holiness. So let's continue. So let's think for a moment. The circumcision has 2 parts, like we discussed, the cut and the fold, the peri'ah. The cut is not the dangerous part, but the fold and removal is. This fold and removal was not commanded for them to do on Passover Eve. They just had to cut themselves to remove blood from there. Okay, because otherwise they would not be able to move at all. Remember what happened on the 3rd day, right? So they're walking now for 3 days after that. That would not be possible. And we know that roughly 6 to 9 hours after they circumcised, they had to flee Egypt, right? As the sun was setting, they had to slaughter the lamb, they had to barbecue it, they had to eat it, wipe the blood and everything, and then shortly after, like around midnight, God comes, firstborn. Shortly after that, they had to skedaddle, okay? In other words, they probably did this around, I would assume, sunset, without daylight savings time, around 4:30, 5 o'clock. 3 stars come out at about 5:20, 5:26 nowadays, something around that time. Okay, maybe a little bit later because it was in Nisan, but still. So anywhere between 6 to 9 hours they had to go. After you have a complete circumcision, you are not going anywhere. So their circumcision was incomplete, but this was according to what God told them to do, exactly how God told them to do. Otherwise, they wouldn't have exited Egypt, right? Right. Okay, in other words, they did everything the Lord had commanded. So why did they not do peri'ah along the way? Because it was on the way. If they were not on the way, they would have done a full and complete circumcision, of course. But due to the circumstances which God obviously put them in, it was more than enough. As they did not hear the voice of God when they received the Torah, right? As they did indeed hear the voice of God when they received the Torah. Now let's go over a general question over here, okay? Which we should all know the answer to. Is it greater to learn Torah or to implement Torah? We know this, right? It's greater to implement Torah, meaning the mitzvot. Are you going to learn Torah or live Torah? Okay. If you sit and learn Torah all day long but don't implement it, and don't implement what you've learned, the Talmud says it would be better if you would not be born. So, forgive me, I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but let's say, if you're a yeshiva bacher and you learn Torah from morning to night. I remember when I was in Or Samech, I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, now I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, get up, when it's still dark outside, you go to Shacharit and you study all day long until the sun goes down and then later. If I was, well, take me. If I would be studying like that Torah all day long, every day, all day, I'm so, okay, great, I'm Torah. But if I'm behaving without derech eretz, it would have been better if I were not born, okay? So anybody that does this, that they learn Torah and they study Torah, but they don't act according to Torah, that's what the Talmud says. Be very, very careful. Okay. The Torah is life. And it is by it that we shall all live. Hence, the tree of life, right? Now, would you say that the 40 years in the wilderness was them learning Torah, more learning Torah, or more living Torah? The truth is, it was both. But it only began to count once they entered into the land of Israel. It only began to count. Everything else was practice. How so? Because if you read Exodus through Deuteronomy, for goodness sakes, you will see that most of the commands revolve around the land of Israel. And also upon the temple in the place where God will choose. It's where are all these commands coming from, right? A lot we can't do today because we don't have a temple. When they were in the wilderness, all their needs were taken care of. So in addition to the fact that they could not perform all the commandments because they were not in the land of Israel, they could make a certain blessing. They couldn't make a certain blessing because they did not have the need to even make these blessings. The whole purpose of fulfilling the Torah takes place in the very land that God promised Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob, as we can see back in Genesis 17, when God establishes the covenant of circumcision with Abraham. And I will establish my covenant between me and between you and between your seed after you throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. In other words, this will never end. To be to you for a God and to your seed after you. And I will give you and your seed after you the land of your sojourning, where you're walking around right now. That land, this land where we're on right now, the entire land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. Everlasting covenant, everlasting possession, and I will be to them for a God. This is it. Everything revolves around the land of Israel. I cannot stress this enough. This is not my opinion. This is the word of God. Read the 5 books of Moses, particularly from Exodus to Deuteronomy, and you will see. Okay? Okay. And now, in PDE, we will see this play out. We continue with our text. When the children of Israel came to the land of Israel, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to Joshua, "Do you not know that Israel are not properly circumcised? Go back and circumcise them a second time, as said in Joshua 5:2. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, make for yourself sharp knives and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time," right? Shenit. Rishon is first, Sheni, second. So the second time. In other words, I told you to do it the first time. I never told you to do it again. Okay, why? Because you're on the way. I'm the one giving you the rules. But now, before you're about to enter into the land of Israel, where everything is going to count for real, now you have to do it. Why did they have to do it a second time, right? If they already did it right then. Because if you don't remove the flesh, if you don't do priyah, then obviously it grows back. So a second time, then it just basically scars up. So there you go, a second time. But this time, everything has to be complete. The cut plus the removal of the foreskin. So remember what happened when Moses was walking along the way, and then it said the angel of the Lord was there and was about to kill him. And so Zipporah went and she circumcised her kids. And she tossed the foreskin at his feet, and so they didn't kill Moses. You understand how important this is, right? So in other words, there's no way that Israel could have gotten away with this if God didn't say so. Very specific circumstances, obviously, but we have to understand, okay, by what's written and also by what happened and by extrapolating also what didn't happen. So Joshua circumcised Israel properly a second time and gathered all the foreskins until they became like a hill, as said in Joshua 5:3. And Joshua made for himself sharp knives and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. El Giv'at, Giv'ah is a hill, Ha'aralot, Orlah, right? Orlah is a foreskin. There was a hill of foreskins. It's a lot of foreskins. So Israel took the foreskin and the blood and would cover them with the dust of the wilderness right before they entered. We've discussed in previous teachings, specifically the ones regarding Adam and the curses he received, how dust is what cleanses the flesh, right? I think the one is called, For Dust You Are. Listen to that again, okay? Since Adam was made up of dust, let's just give you a thing. Since Adam was made up of dust, and God cursed him that he will return to dust, Satan and the serpent may have been appeased. But this only means that through death and burial, man can physically be cleansed, only to be resurrected in the end of time. So it's like, okay, you're going to die. Great, but you have to die so you can be resurrected. Specifically in the dust you're returning to from whence you came. So listen to that teaching. This is why we have burial laws. This is for our own good. You are not allowed to cremate a Jew, okay? Everyone else wants to do their thing, but return from where you came from, okay? The earth is cleansing. When Balaam the magician came and saw the wilderness is filled with the foreskins of Israel, he said, "Who can stand against the blood of the circumcision covered in dust?" And also, as said in Numbers 23:10, who counted the dust of Jacob, or the number of the fourth, or of the seed of Israel? May my soul die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his, said Balaam in Numbers 23:10. Okay? Otherwise, we could have asked, how could it be that Balaam saw the foreskins when he was already killed off way before they entered the land of Israel? Right? Good question. Remember, who was Balaam? Balaam had the same vision, knowledge, understanding, and prophecy levels of Moses. We discussed God had to give someone just like Moses to the nations, so the nations will say, oh, you're clearly favoring Israel. It's like, well, here's your guy. He's got the same abilities as my guy. What is he doing with it? Yep, he's doing his donkey. That's what he's doing with it. Otherwise, okay, so we could ask, how could this be? He was a magician, he could prophesy, he could see into the future, he had tremendous power, and was equal to Moses from the dark end of the spectrum. So he saw all these things take place in the future, including his own demise, which is where the blessings came from. When you prophesy for real, you can't lie as to what you see, because your body is then taken over. You are nothing more than a vessel. So, anybody listening to this and still going to those yahoos over there, right? And if anybody's like, I'm prophesying right now, the Lord has spoken, and all this stuff, but that doesn't happen. So they lied, right? So that means it doesn't happen. That means it doesn't come from God. That means it's a false prophet. And what do we do with false prophets, right? Okay, so just so we see that, are you still listening to these people? Now it's on you. From here the sages instituted that they shall cover the foreskin and the blood with the dust from the earth, because Israel are compared to the dust of the earth, as said in Genesis 28:14. And this is the Jacob's dream, with the ladder. And behold, the Lord was standing over him, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land upon which you are lying, to you I will give it, and to your seed, and your seed shall be as the dust of the earth. Israel are likened to the dust of the earth. Yes, to the stars, but also to the dust of the earth. Remember, you're going to return to, it's okay, Israel are likened to dust. And you shall gain strength westward and eastward and northward and southward, and through you shall be blessed all the families of the earth, and through your seed. Not around, not in any way, through. And what is through? Only going through Jacob. Period. So, If Israel are likened to dust, would it be safe to say that the very substance that Adam was made up of was Israel? Oh yeah. Bereshit Israel. At first, Israel. The first word in the Torah, the last word in the Torah. Bereshit Israel. And the first letter being Bet, the last letter being Lamed, and together that is Lev, heart. Okay, never forget that, kids. All of existence is about Israel. Like we said, Adam's first child was supposed to be Israel, but we know what happened along the way, and we're still coming back from that. Furthermore, Jacob, Israel, had the same face as Adam, which sits beneath the throne of God, and that is, of course, eternal. And so thus Israel would perform the circumcision until, dun dun dun, until the kingdoms split. We know that there were two kingdoms in Israel, right? This was in the days of Rechavam, Judah, and Yeravam, Ephraim. We discussed this. Rechavam was the son of Solomon. 3 generations, 73 years, kingdom splits, brothers fight. Okay? This happened already twice in the past, and the third time now in our day. In the 73rd year is the establishment of the modern state of Israel in the 73rd year. That's when all the balagan happened. We went through 5 election rounds, and still nothing is stable right now. See what's going on here, please. We learned all about this in the Red series, okay? What happened over here? The Secret of Mashiach ben Yosef. Go watch that teaching. I highly recommend it, especially if you still got hang-ups with the other guy. And the kingdom of Ephraim prevented Israel from circumcision. The kingdom of Ephraim. There's Judah, there's Ephraim. Ephraim is Joseph, right? The 10 tribes. The kingdom of Ephraim is also the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom, meaning without Judah, who is in the south. This incident with the golden calves and the complete removal of the Torah commandments is why the 10 tribes later were removed from the land. They were kidnapped by the Assyrians, specifically because of what they did, right? Dispersed all over the world, and they have been gone ever since before the destruction of the first temple. Before the destruction of the first temple. These are the lost tribes. Elijah, may he be remembered for good, arose and was zealous with a mighty passion, and he swore to the heavens not to send down neither dew nor rain upon the earth. Jezebel heard this and sought to kill him. By the way, where do we see that Israel stopped circumcision? 1 Kings 19, 10, and 14. It's the same verse, right? And he said, I have been zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. What covenant? Brit. Right? Ki azvu britcha bnei Israel. And they torn down your altars, and they've killed your prophets by the sword and so on. But they left your covenant, right? Again, Israel, the children of Israel specifically over there. Elijah rose and prayed before the Holy One, blessed be he. Now these words came a few verses earlier in verse 4. He went to the desert, a distance of 1 day's travel, and he came and sat under a juniper and requested that his soul die. He said, enough. Now, Lord, take my soul, as I am not better than my forefathers. Not take my soul, take kach nafshi. In other words, take my life. Kill me. Don't kill my soul. Ravata Hashem, kach nafshi, ki lo tov anochi me'avotai. I'm not better than my forefathers. Elijah asked for death because he knew he wasn't going to die. As we know, Elijah is Pinchas. He's been alive for a very long time. He's like, can you please kill me already? I'm done. How many more times do I have to see them breaking your covenant? Okay, now listen. Ki lo tov anochi. Tov is good, right? Tov is also the gematria of 17. Tov also hints towards the Brit. It hints towards the Yesod. Tov, which means good, has a numerical value of 17, like we said. Joseph was 17 years old Joseph was 17 years old, living in his father's house, right, in Parashat Vayeshev. That Joseph the Tzaddik, the righteous, was 17 when we read of him from the beginning of his journey, and he is Yesod, right? In other words, he's speaking over here specifically about the Yesod. That's where the Brit takes place. And Anochi is a hint towards the word Malchut, meaning, because your people have removed the covenant of circumcision from themselves, there is no connection between Yesod and Malchut as there needs to be. Something fascinating I heard. The word Anochi, right? That's when God said in the Ten Commandments, Anochi Hashem Elohe, I am the Lord your God, Anochi. Anochi specifically means I myself and there is no one else, right? So that Lo Tov Anochi. I personally, myself, am not better than my forefathers. So our friend, the scribe, he actually told me about this. You know the Egyptian sign, the Ankh, right? It almost looks like a cross, but it's got like a loop on top, and it's an ancient Egyptian symbol. So the ancient Egyptians said that this was their most powerful symbol. What is Ankh? Anochi. Anchi. You see that he goes Anochi, in other words, the one. Therefore, so they made some sort of like symbol of it. Very, very interesting and very cool. So in any case, Anochi, I am not better than them regarding the Yesod and the Malchut, because there's a disconnect over here. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, you are better than your forefathers. Esav sought to kill Jacob, as said in Genesis 27:41. And Esav hated Jacob because of the blessings that his father had blessed him. And Esav said to himself, let the days of mourning my father draw near. I will then kill my brother Jacob. And Rebekah was told of the words of Esav, her elder son, and she sent, she called Jacob, her younger son, and she said to him, behold, your brother Esav regrets his relationship to you and wishes to kill you. And now, my son, hearken to my voice, arise and flee to my brother Lavan to Haran. Okay? All right. Actually, Harana, it says, with the hey, meaning God's over there waiting for you. Now Jacob fled from before him, as it is said in Hosea 12:13. And Jacob fled to the field of Aram, and Israel worked for a wife, and for a wife he guarded. Ubeisha shamar. Pharaoh sought to kill Moses, so Moses fled. We're talking about fleeing over here. So Moses fled from before him, as said in Exodus 2:15. Pharaoh heard of this incident, and he sought to slay Moses, so Moses fled from before Pharaoh. He stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Who else, right? We're going to see the servants of God running. David. We're coming up to David right now. Jacob, Moses, now David. Saul sought to kill David, and David fled from before him, as it is said in 1 Samuel 19:10. And Saul attempted to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he slipped away from Saul, and Saul drove the spear into the wall, but David fled and escaped on that night. This is to teach us that everyone who flees escapes, meaning lives. Anyone who flees, runs away from trouble, you'll live. People learn from this, okay? If you know that someone greater or more powerful than you is coming to kill you, you don't just sit there and say, God will protect me. You use the sense that God gave you, and you flee for your life. Elijah rose up and fled from the land of Israel, as said in 1 Kings 19:8. And he arose and he ate and he drank, and he went with the strength of his meal 40 days and 40 nights up to the mountain of the Lord, Chorev. He left Israel, right? Because Chorev, Mount Sinai, is not in the land of Israel. That is where God appeared to him, as seen in verse 9. And he came there to the cave, and he lodged there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. And he said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? What did Elijah answer him? And he said, I have been zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to him, you've always been zealous. Le'olam ata mekaneh, he said. If you read this strictly in the Hebrew, in the way it's written, you can see a very clear hint as to what will be, because God's words do not return void. Le'olam ata mekaneh. You will be zealous forever. right? Choki le'olam. It is a statute forever, for eternity. Le'olam atam mekane. God is saying, you will be zealous forever. And that's exactly what the case is. And you're zealous about the Brit Milah specifically, right? Kineta bashitim, God says, you have been zealous in shittim regarding sexual immorality, as said in Numbers 25:11. Pinchas, Elijah, Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the Kohen, has turned my anger away from the children of Israel by his zealousy avenging me among them, so that I did not destroy the children of Israel because of my zeal. We've also given plenty of classes and teachings not only regarding Parshat Pinchas, but the specific instance from the end of Balak, what happened, and the beginning of Pinchas. So just a quick recap at the relevance of the story with Elijah and the covenant, the Brit, that God made with Abraham. In the end of Parshat Balak, after Bilam failed to penetrate the Iron Dome, right? That was the teaching of that one, Iron Dome, which is God's protection over Israel due to their purity. Bilam realized that the only way to harm Israel is if they come outside this protection. What gives this protection? Keeping the Brit, keeping that covenant. When you break that covenant, you are open, susceptible to anything and everything, and it will come at you. Okay? That is your protection. So long as Israel kept the covenant, no harm could possibly come to them. But if they were to stray after their eyes and after their hearts, as we have been warned in the Shema, right? Lo tatu acharei levavchem acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem, right? Then that happens, then it's open season. That's where he told the Midianites to parade their women in front of their eyes and see who comes out, because one will bring a friend, and so on and so forth. You recall God saying that anyone who breaks this covenant shall be cut off from his people? In the end of Balak, Numbers 25:6, it says, right? Okay, anyone who breaks the covenant will be cut off from his people. Now, so we said Numbers 25:6. Then an Israelite man came and brought the Midianite woman to his brethren before the eyes of Moses and before the eyes of the entire congregation of the children of Israel while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Oy vavoy. Notice how the Israelite man has no name. Pinchas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the Kohen, saw this, arose from the congregation, and took a spear in his hand. And he went after the Israelite man into the chamber and drove it through them both, the Israelite man and the woman, through her stomach, and the plague ceased from the children of Israel. The Midrash says that Pinchas skewered them both with one spear and held them up high for all to see. There were 10 miracles that happened over there. He was a Kohen, so no blood could spill down on him. The spear didn't break, and so on and so forth. A lot of things over there. Specifically, he stuck that spear straight through the man's brit, okay? And right through the woman's womb. God forbid she would conceive. As they were fornicating out in the open right before Moses and the elders to see, before everybody. But then a few verses later in Parashat Pinchas, after he had returned the Lord's anger, thereby saving Israel, we see something fascinating in verse 14. The name of the Israelite man, I'm actually reading it, the name of the Israelite man who was killed, who was slain with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, son of Salu, the chieftain of the Simeonite paternal house. The man's name was Zimri ben Salu. Through penalty of death, it was this specific death, Zimri was redeemed of his terrible crime against God and his people, and now his name has not been cut off from his people, as he is mentioned by name in the Torah. You see? Amazing stuff. And it's if you know what it says, so you can extrapolate, like, oh, why is his name mentioned here right now? Because justice has been served. And now his name is in the Torah. When Moses said, blot my name out of the Torah, the next parsha, Moses' name is not there. Literally, it's not there. So this guy could have been cut off from his people forever, but now he's not. Redemption through death. Okay. So again, God told Elijah, You have been zealous in Shittim regarding sexual immorality, and you are zealous here as well. As we read, for Israel breaking the covenant. As a result, God continues, by your life, Israel will not circumcise their sons until you see it with your own eyes. This was a rebuke to Elijah, all but for just raising his hands and telling God he had enough. God's like, you have enough when I say you have enough. So now I say you have enough. You got to do all these things. Go get Elisha, tell him to kill that if he doesn't kill him, and so on. You read basically. But forever, whenever the children of Israel circumcise their sons, you're going to be there. So God said, you've been so worried about maintaining the brit, henceforth you will be witness to every last one of them until the end of time. Elijah accused all of Israel of breaking God's covenant, but God corrected him in verse 18, saying, and I will leave over in Israel 7,000. All the knees that did not kneel to the Baal, and every mouth that did not kiss him. There's also a very, very terrible prophecy from 500 years ago, saying that in the end of days, this is what's going to happen. Only 7,000 will remain of Israel because everybody else is going to be in idolatry. Even those that don't believe that they're in idolatry, I'm sure I have idolatry in my life. No joke. You have to live in a box like this to not have it, but it's there so you can fight it. You understand? That's why, thank God, my wife is my mirror. And if I'm out of place, what about this? What about that? And this is also how we really have to check ourselves, because there's always room for improvement. If there wasn't, your tikkun would be complete and you would no longer be in this world. Understand that, okay? But the fact is that we are here. We all got some form of idolatry. Obviously, clean your house. Make sure you don't have any unkosher books or anything like that. Now you got to clean your insides, right? What are you looking at? What are you listening to? Where are you going? There's always something. So he said all of Israel's gone. God said 7,000 remain, and the prophecy says that 7,000 in the end of days will remain, and only 7,000. But from all of Israel outside, when God gathers everybody, they're going to come to Israel, they're going to see only 7,000 actually remained. So it's kind of scary. So everyone counts, basically. From here, our sages had decreed that a seat of honor be made for the angel of the covenant. Who's the angel of the covenant? It's Elijah. Elijah became an angel, as we know, and his specific job was to oversee the covenant, the Brit of Israel, as said in Malachi, behold, I send my angel, and he will clear a way before me. And suddenly the Lord, whom you seek, will come to his temple, and behold, the angel of the covenant, whom you desire, is coming, says the Lord of hosts. Right? May the God of Israel hasten the coming of the Mashiach to comfort us and renew our hearts, as said in Malachi 3:24. But let's read the verse before for context. And this is after God removes all the evil from the world. Once all the evil is gone. Keep in remembrance the Torah of Moses, my servant, the laws and ordinances which I commanded him in Horeb for all of Israel. In other words, we are commanded to follow it says that Torat Moshe Avdi, the law of Moses my servant. There is no done away with. There is until the end of time, until God returns, we do this. The laws and ordinances. Asher tziviti oto bechorev al kol Israel chukim umishpatim, laws and ordinances, okay? When this is done correctly and to the best of our ability, then we can read the following verse. Lo, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. Why do we desire Malach HaBrit? Because we know what's coming next. And when this happens, in other words, God doesn't return until Elijah doesn't come first, because that's what he says. And when this happens, in order for all of Israel to fully and properly return to God, we read the next verse, that he may turn the heart of the fathers back through the children, and the heart of the children's back through their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with utter destruction. This is Elijah doing this. What does this mean? We learned this in the beginning of the chapter a couple of weeks ago in Ezekiel 36:26. And I will give you, not at any point before the time of the end, I will give you a new heart and a new spirit. Lev chadash veruach chadasha eten bekirbechem, I will put within you. And I will take away the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh. This cannot happen until it happens at the end of days, when Elijah comes before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Read it. This cannot be done before that time that God said that it will be done, and it will only be done at the time of the end. Because when this will be done, it means that the evil inclination will be removed from the people, and we will know that the evil inclination is a necessary component to keep the commands. Otherwise, there's no resistance. Always an ever-present, acting as a much-needed resistance for our spiritual growth. To sum up this entire topic in a sentence, okay? I would say that the circumcision is only the first step, but it is only through this step that we merit to keep the commandments of the Torah. We get it when we're 8 days, right? Only through this we merit to keep the commandments of the Torah, and when we do so, all of us, then God will hasten the coming of the angel of this covenant, the angel of the covenant Elijah, and right after him, Mashiach ben David. Amen. B'mera b'yameinu. This is our class. Stay tuned for next week. We discuss the 9th trial of Abraham, which is something that we are all struggling with till this very day. As always, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Have a meaningful fast. It's Asara B'Tevet, and have a Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye now.